Hey everyone, welcome to kind of the reignition of Musings with Amanda. So, as many of you know, I am completely obsessed with emotions, stress, and really trying to understand how it is that we move forward with trauma and regain agency over our lives and re-find safety in our bodies again, which is exactly what I want to unpack with you today. So there's this idea that issues are stored in your tissues. And now that's actually being backed by research and science. And we're actually seeing this come in a whole new way where we can actually say, yeah, we do have a cellular memory. We are storing emotion, memory, maybe traumatic experiences or really high intensity stressors. We're storing that at a cellular level in our body. So basically, it gets imprinted into our nervous system and onto our body. This is especially true when an emotion cycle isn't completed. Like when we don't go through the whole cycle of it, so beginning, middle, and end, this memory isn't fully processed or this emotion isn't fully processed, and that energy doesn't get transmuted. It isn't released in a sense. So, one more time. When we experience something extremely stressful or traumatic, the actual physiology of the moment and emotions that we feel in our body can actually imprint. So, imprinting onto the nervous system and into our body. So, we think of this as either a cellular memory or some people will call it a fascial memory, whatever works for you. But in this, what we know and hear is that this is why we can never know how, when, or why something might activate or trigger someone. Because it really does depend on how and where it's stored in the body. So if it's stored in a certain way and then you move through, say, a fascial plane in your body and you move in a certain direction or you take a certain shape in your body, that movement, that shift in your fascial and connective tissue might actually be the thing that activates or triggers that memory to be remembered and to be activated once again. So there's so much in this, so much. We can think of emotion as energy in motion, emotion. And this means that the healthy understanding, processing, and releasing of emotions is fluid and it moves through you. It dissipates when the experience passes, but only when the cycle is complete. The problem arises when emotion gets trapped or stuck. It's important to process, integrate, and then shift this emotional memory so that it's no longer stored and you can move beyond kind of the way that it's conditioned and programmed you to react to various experiences, people, things, all of that. So if we have something stored in our body, again, it can get activated or triggered at any point with the words people say, the way that we move, or the certain touch of something or someone. This all has the potential to have that memory be flooded again because it hasn't actually been processed and been moved through us. So if you're somebody who has ever experienced something like that, you know that somatic experience, that felt experience of having a memory resurface. So for some people, to actually move this energy through them or to process emotion or memory, this means things like talk therapy. So verbally talking through things, actually having the resonance of your voice and the resonance of that vibration moving out and through you as you say it. If you've ever had a really good conversation with somebody that you trust and care about, by the end of that conversation, sometimes you feel so much better. And maybe you shared something vulnerable or something deep, and after you're like, oh, I can take a breath now. Same kind of thing with the talk therapy. So transmuting it in that way. For others, it's going to be working with maybe a trauma-informed yoga or somatics practitioner. And this can actually help you find safety in your body again. So by working with a trauma-informed yoga instructor, it's going to be something that it's developed and done in a certain way that you can again figure out what it's like for you to feel safe in your body again. So kind of finding that empowerment piece. Same thing with somatics. It's a retraining of how it is that you feel, experience, and process past memories and emotions, anything like that. It can also be a number of other modalities that work best for different people. I think the point is to really find support and begin to regain trust and safety in your body, which we'll get more to in a moment. So we'll get into exactly what that looks like. So within that, let's look at how these stored traumas can actually manifest as physical and sometimes mental symptoms, possibly even illness, as some of us have experienced before, myself included, absolutely. So trauma and stress activates your stress response. It's the stress response that when it's experienced chronically, or maybe to an extreme degree, this has a huge impact on almost every single system in your body. So think of your nervous, your cardiovascular, your musculoskeletal, respiratory, endocrine, immune system. They all take a massive hit. And this is due to the stress hormones that are coursing through your body, wreaking havoc essentially, changing the calibration and the regulation in your body so that systems aren't working in balance and they're not working in a way that they can bounce back to their baseline again. So again, this is kind of a superficial look at what all of this does, but thinking of it in a way of why is it so important to actually move these things out of the body? This can cause inflammation, discomfort, pain, headaches, lowered immune function, altered cognitive function, low libido, and a high sensory sensitivity. So much more. So if any of these are sounding familiar to you, you may have experienced something that's still stored in your body, emotions that are still unprocessed, that are kind of creating this essentially like a stagnation or a blockage in your body. And with that blockage is coming this inflammation and all of these other things that come from it. So it's really important that we understand that if we can't self-regulate, if we can't tell our body and our brain that we're actually safe, then this cycle doesn't fully complete and it's going to continue. And this is when we can lead to things like heart disease, burnout, depression, anxiety, and myriad other health risks. So I think it's really important to understand these things because as we've given stress such a bad name, we also have to take account and responsibility for the fact that we're actually not taught how to deal with stress. We're not taught how to deal with traumatic memory or emotions for that matter. Like if you think about how little education and knowledge we get around feeling emotion first and foremost, and then what to do with it. How do we actually complete this cycle? How do we actually move in and through that? So that's exactly what I want to talk about next. How can we actually move through this and regain control and safety again? And I think first of all, it's really, really important to remember and to trust that your body is doing exactly what it's meant to do. It's protecting you. That is quite literally all it cares about. It wants to protect and make sure that you are the safest so that you can survive, so that you can pass on your genes. Because remember, that's the wiring that we have, is to survive as long as we can and make sure that our DNA and our genes are passed down. So our body is literally just trying to protect and make sure that we're safe. So all of the symptoms that you feel, you might not intellectually think that they are helpful, but it's your body's way of trying to save and protect you. So when we can reframe our relationship with our coping mechanisms or our defense mechanisms, we can start to see that it really is just our way of finding safety. So all we need to do here is a little work on recalibrating our alarm system, because that's what the brain is always doing. The amygdala is always scanning to see if any threats, anything that is unsafe or could be too challenging, anything like that, anything that's life-threatening, it's always on the lookout. and it doesn't understand the difference between physical threat and emotional threat. It's very neutral. It's just like, that's a threat. Get out, figure it out, fight, flight, freeze. What are we going to do and how are we going to survive? And it's making that decision in less than a second. So, like, quicker than I can snap my fingers, that system is already in play when it perceives a threat. So the first thing we need to consider when trying to complete this, when trying to move things through our body to process them, is consider, what is it that makes you feel the safest? What is it that makes you feel the safest? Because how is it that you can tell your whole being, body and mind, that you are now safe and out of harm's way? Because the parasympathetic nervous system, or that more rest, repair, heal, and digest system, cannot really come online and do its magical job of healing, repairing, digesting, all of that, if the sympathetic is still on high alert. So if we're still even subconsciously, unconsciously thinking that there's some sort of threat, we're still in that stress response. We still have stress hormones coursing through our body. So think of things like you have a deadline coming up at work. And yes, while you're at work, you're feeling stressed, but then you come home and you feel and think that you're safe and okay. But then the very next day, you have to go back into the workplace, still working towards that deadline. That's stressful. So how is it that you're completing and maintaining overall health and well-being as you go through that? Because we have to know that if the brain is always in scan mode, always watching out for potential threats and ready to prime you for that fight, flight, freeze, it can only truly disengage when you're engaged in something that calms you. So we have to find the things that make us feel the safest, that make us feel like, okay, there's no potential threat right here, right now. I'm good. So maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's a bath with the door locked so that you know you're not going to get interrupted. Maybe it's connecting with really close friends and family that you know you actually feel better after being around them, not drained. Eating really good quality, healthy food that makes you feel just delightful from the inside out. Whatever it is, can you engage in this more? Can you notice if you can be fully present to the safety and positive feelings that are associated with it? So can you be in that moment and feel your shoulders relax and feel tension ease from your body? Notice if your breathing changes. Notice how your whole physiology can change in that moment and have that sense of safety. And can you find more pockets of that throughout the day, throughout the week? Whatever it is, maybe it's baby steps and you build it up. But over time, you have to really notice that this is the thing that can help regulate and really complete these cycles that we're going through. So if you're working with past trauma, if you're working with any of the maybe big or overwhelming emotions that come up, any stressors that you might notice, all these same concepts apply. So working with past trauma, for example, again, you must feel fully secure. You must feel safe before trying to work with, process, and integrate the experience. And this is so that you can fully complete and shift it without risking the re-traumatization. Because for some, there is that potential to re-traumatize when you work with your trauma in an unsafe environment or with an unsafe practitioner. So there's so many modalities to choose from. You can work with and through your trauma with yoga, meditation, somatic experiencing, talk therapy, NLP, hypnotherapy. The list quite literally goes on forever. So many practitioners that you can work with. And it's really important to remember that some modalities are going to work with your nervous system and your brain, while others are going to work on that more body level, so more of the somatic level. I do believe that no matter what, no matter which option you choose, eventually the body does need to be addressed. eventually your body does need to be worked with in order to fully transmute the stuck energy. This is going to be what helps reprogram the coping mechanism in order to allow you to tap into your resilience and your resources. This is the point that you can find safety in your body once again. Because remember, if memory, trauma, emotion, if that can be stored in your physical body, yet you're only working with your nervous system or your brain and trying to think your way through it, you haven't actually dealt with the holistic approach to this. You haven't dealt with all aspects and angles. So it really needs to be considered that body and mind need to have the approach. So then how do you actually choose a modality that works for you? Great question. So glad you asked. First and foremost, it's really, really important, I think, to not be afraid to actually interview the practitioner. So if you have somebody in mind, or maybe you've been recommended someone, or maybe you heard, oh, NLP is really, really great, I'm just going to go do it. You have to remember that you, in this moment, are your own and probably only advocate. Only you can truly advocate for what's best for you because no one else can possibly know it. And I think this is a really important thing to drive home because quite often, if we've experienced trauma, if we've experienced big, overwhelming emotion, it can be really scary to try and trust ourselves again. It can be scary to not know what we're feeling or not know what we're thinking inside. And it can be, in that, really easy to think, okay, well, it worked for that person, I'll just go do that thing. And I think this is the point where we need to be really mindful of only I know what I'm potentially capable of in this moment. So I need to check in with myself and know what's important to me. Am I at the point where I want to try a certain modality? Like, what do I feel in my body when I think of that? So when I think of talk therapy, what comes up for me? What do I think of? How do I feel? And within that, interview each practitioner. So put yourself first. Trust that it's better for you to wait until you find the right person for you than to risk undoing all of the work you've done until this point by engaging with someone unsafe. You can ask them for their credentials, the years and type of experience they have. You can ask them where they did their training and ask them to also be really honest with you. If they don't think that they're the right fit for you, if they don't think that they can actually show up and be a safe base for you, then ask them to be honest, and maybe they have somebody else that they can recommend and refer out to. That's the sign of a really trustworthy and good practitioner in my personal and professional view. If I know that I maybe don't have the scope of practice or their story is way too close to my own trauma history, then I might not be the right fit because we might actually play out a healing dynamic or a trauma dynamic that's unsafe for both of us. And I don't want to risk their well-being, and I absolutely don't want to risk mine. So it's really important to be upfront and ask people, like, if this isn't the right fit, great, who else can I go to? And just because somebody else found success with a certain type of modality does not mean that it's the right one for you. And that's okay. There's so many times where people are like, oh, well, this person found such great success and they're so healthy and happy now, and that's exactly what I want, so I'm going to go to this person. But the way that they approached healing actually was completely different than what they needed and didn't support them at all and actually made things a little bit worse, or a lot worse sometimes. So we have to be really okay with our own healing journey being exactly what it needs to be for us and no one else. So what works for me might not work for you. What works for you might not work for me. Perfect. There's a bajillion practitioners in this world doing a plethora of different things. We are all capable of finding that one thing that works for us, and it doesn't need to be the same as what's working for others. So for me personally, I know there's a certain type of therapy that's really only part of the solution for me. But then I also need yoga and somatic work on top of that. And this helps me to integrate and process all of my experiences on every level. And that took kind of trial and error. Like, I didn't really have resources of trying to figure out who and what worked for me. So I had to just try things on and then move to the next and go through my own re traumatization of being with different people and different modalities. So over time, I found, okay, I know that I think in this certain way, so this really helps me. And I know that I feel in this certain way, so this really helps me. And then I kind of like makeshift the healing journey that's best for me. So some people are going to choose Reiki. Some are going to choose like chakra cleansing or NLP or exercise-based therapy. Maybe it's cognitive behavioral therapy, art therapy, like anything in the world. What resonates with you? What piques your interest? What do you already know and love? And is there a way to incorporate that into your journey back to yourself? Because that's what this is all about. It's about finding your wholeness again and understanding that only you have the tools within. You have all of this resilience and all of these resources already within you. It's just a matter of finding somebody who can maybe help point you in the direction to find them within yourself. Nobody else can do this work or this healing for you. Sometimes thinking of a certain modality is going to make you feel deeply uncomfortable. It's going to make you want to run the other way. And sometimes that's the exact sign that you need that tells you this is where you need to be. And this is exactly what you need to do in order to fully heal. So I know for me, that was things like hypnotherapy. I was really just against it, didn't believe in it, didn't want to go there, didn't want to do the whole inner child work, and I avoided it. I like poo-pooed it and said, nope, not for me, not going to happen. And then finally I came around and was like, okay, let's try it, because I was so deeply uncomfortable with it. And it ended up being a really, really healing experience for me. And it was because I faced that uncomfortability when I felt strong enough in myself, when I felt more connected to my inner resources. Then I could do the deeply uncomfortable things because I knew that I could hold myself in that space. I knew that I had the tools at this point to self-regulate and to navigate the big emotions and whatever could potentially come up. So it wasn't until I felt that I dove into the uncomfortable things. So you might be someone who's like, no, I just dive into the uncomfortable stuff right away. Great. Everybody's healing journey is different. So the last thing that I want to leave you with is the practice that changed my life. The practice that basically changed everything. It changed my relationship with stress, my trauma history, and my emotions. It changed my relationship with me, my family, my friends. Yeah, it literally changed my life, and that's yin yoga. So yin yoga, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, is the more kind of slow, quiet, introspective practice. It asks you to be still and silent for an extended length of time. So some people will call it like, oh, that's the stretching yoga. Yes, and there's so much more to it. You're not actually, that's not the focus. That's not the intention. There's so much to this practice. So yin really does ask you to be slow, to be quiet and still and patient. It asks you to yield to the practice rather than going where you think is best. It's asking you to let your body lead the way, to kind of surrender to yourself and drop out of the thinking mind and into the feeling body. And I think yin is just so magical in so many ways. And while this practice has potential to be highly triggering for people, as does meditation for some, that needs to be a caveat. Meditation isn't for everyone. But it also holds the potential to help someone develop the tools and to develop the resilience required to find a sense of strength and stillness in this chaos and discomfort that is our society today, that is our daily lives, whatever that looks like. So it kind of asks you, how is it that you can be mindfully aware of your racing mind and uncomfortable physical sensations on your mat, and then translate those tools to something you can use off of the mat. So when you're faced with an overwhelming or challenging situation, it takes you to your edges. And over time, maybe you notice that they start to soften as you do this work. It asks you to be still and listen to the silence. What is it that you are trying to tell you? So can you listen to the silence and let it speak? Within all of that, it takes you to this place where you really have to hold gentle and patient compassion for yourself, allowing yourself to be whatever and whoever you are in that moment, trusting that all is welcome. You're asked to be silent and still and very, very aware of yourself and your present moment experience. So sometimes the emotion floods, sometimes it quietly simmers, and other times it's more quiet and peaceful, and I focus on my physical body instead. Regardless, I know now that I have the tools to allow and handle whatever arises. So I know that I can breathe in and through it. I can ride the waves of emotion. I can ride the ever-changing and shifting inner landscape. It allows me to yield to the full cycle and let it take place and experience the fullness of each moment and let it all wash through me. It's almost like finding comfort in discomfort, finding strength in softness, and finding the healing within the slow, passive moments with myself. So when I think about my yin practice and maybe the reasons that I facilitate it and the reasons that I run the teacher trainings, so the 100-hour teacher trainings, I know that it's first and foremost because of the profound effects that I've experienced with it for myself. But please know that I don't offer any of this with the intention of it being a healing practice for someone else, because that's up to them to decide. They have to discover it and decide for themselves if it's this magical healing practice that it is for me, because it might not be. It's not for everyone. So what I do within all of this is create the safest space possible for people to explore their own experience in their own way. So I hold space for whatever unfolds. These principles are uncovered so much more in depth in the yin yoga teacher trainings that I facilitate, both online and in person, because really I'm on a mission to help people reconnect with their own innate inner healer. I want to help people reclaim power and safety in their bodies and their lives. I want people to understand that the quick fix isn't outside. It's not an external thing. All we can do is meet people along the way and have people maybe plant a little seed, but everything comes from within. So know that your survivorship or your resilience up to this point right here, right now, is incredible. And it's such an amazing feat to have gotten through everything that you've gotten through, regardless of what it looks like. Trust that we can't quantify or qualify anyone's trauma or emotion or stress experience. It is what it is for each individual person. And the fact that you continue to show up, the fact that you continue to do the work in whatever that capacity is for you is amazing. And it's exactly what it needs to be. And then you'll find the people that resonate with you along the way that help shed light on different parts of yourself and help shed light on different ways that you can continue to heal, continue to build and grow. But trust that it's all coming from within. You have got this. Yes, you have got this. So if you're someone who wants to know more about trauma, creating safe, inclusive, and accessible spaces for everyone and everyone in all aspects, all levels, all layers, in all of the glory and beauty that we all are, check out the upcoming online intensive training that we're facilitating in December. You'll find the links in the description. We go in depth into the physiology of trauma, how it shows up on an anatomical level, a neurological level, how we can work in and through these things, but also how we hold space for ourselves to then hold safer space for others. How can we be the anchor for us to then be the safe base for others? So we go through so much goodness. I would also just really love to hear from you in general. So if you have any questions, comments, maybe ideas for future musings, please reach out. I look so forward to hearing from you and sharing with you more and more as we continue to dive into this space of curiosity and cultivating a sense of wisdom and community where we can help elevate each other in our own inner healing as we reclaim power and reclaim safety and just continue to show up as these badass humans that we are. So thank you all so much.